Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be taking a look at a few new items. We have the Natasha Denona Mini My Dream collection, and then I also have both sets of the Chikuhodo holiday brushes for this year. So we're going to take a look at these, and let's start off with Natasha Denona, and then we'll move into the brushes. We'll look at some demos and some comparisons as well. So we're going to start off with the My Mini Dream eyeshadow palette. So this is a 5-pan mini that was inspired by the shade Nurture, which is this one here. This is the creamy matte. I do not have the My Dream palette, but we are going to be comparing this to the I Need a Nude because honestly, I feel like this color story definitely is more reminiscent of that palette than the My Dream, which to me, I would have expected to see some of the like deep plums and so forth. So then we have the, so first up we have this shade here. This is you can see it's a pretty metallic. Then we have this matte. This is our lightest matte. And I want to show you all these swatches before I kind of show you what the, what I feel the undertones are. Now, these are described, a lot of these are described as having like rosy tones. I personally think, if you look at these 5 shades, they have more of a peachy undertone. So these are beautiful peachy neutrals, but they definitely lean warm. And, the swatches and the promo photos, I think they were taken, on warmer skin tones than what I have. I have neutral with some cool overtones. So, colors are pretty true to color on my skin, but if you have a warmer skin tone, these will look cooler than they do on me. But you can see that they definitely have those golden peachy undertones in pretty much all of these shades. The only one that doesn't is going to be this deep brown. So that's the eyeshadow palette. Let's go ahead and move into the blush as well. So this is a blush and highlighter palette. Now you can see it's going to be very difficult to actually isolate the shades. You can isolate the highlighter pretty well, but just because you've got the, gradient edges, you're never going to get 100% isolation. You can definitely use like a smaller blush brush to try to get one shade or the other. But honestly, for me, I'll be using the two of these together because for a blush brush, this is the T3, which I use today. You can see how that kind of fits in there. This is the Sunji detail brush. You can see in order to isolate one of the blushes, you're going to have to use a smaller brush or use your fingers. So we're going to go ahead, let's swatch this. And this here is our highlighter shade. Again, you can see we've got kind of those peachy champagne hues there with some gold in there. These are described, however, as being rosy. So let's see here. First, we're going to do, this is kind of like our intermediate shade, blending the two together. And then here is that matte blush in the middle. And then trying to isolate these. This is our mix and trying to isolate. So those are the shades that you get from this palette. If you wanted to mix them all together to get kind of an illuminating blush, this is the color that you get. And you can see it's a really pretty soft peachy pink that way with some shimmer. So this is the blush palette. Let's take a look at the demos here. We've got eye swatches and demos for both of these products. Talk a little bit more about these. The original Natasha Denona My Dream eyeshadow palette was a midi size, and you had 15 shades with some neutrals, but really to me, the predominant shade there were kind of more like reddish plums and so forth. So that's what I was expecting to see for a mini My Dream. I was expecting to see some of those like violet shades and so forth, plums, eggplants. They were a little bit more on the reddish side, but yeah, I thought we'd see at least one shade like that or something that goes with that. But instead, what we have here is something based off of, it was inspired by the shade Nurture. And so we've got a collection of neutrals here. The shade Nurture is from the original My Dream, but the other 4 shades in this mini are all brand new tones and finishes of that shade. So they're just all inspired by that. So they go very well together. Now, she is describing this as the ultimate cool tone taupe constellation. And in my opinion, this is not cool tone. This definitely has those warmer golden peachy hues in the undertones here. It's a very beautiful palette, but it is going to be neutral, leaning warm. And the finishes and the textures on these are fantastic. You know, they live up to the Natasha Denona quality. The shimmers are excellent. They're very buttery. You can put them on with a brush and get a very soft, subtle finish. You can pile them on a little bit more or use a finger to get a stronger application and get something a little bit more, you know, a little bit more presence in those shades. The mini has 5 shades that are 0.8 grams each. They are made in Italy and we have a 2-year shelf life. So overall though, I think this is a really nice palette. We've got metallics and creamy mattes in here. And I just think it's a really great neutral palette. This would be something great to have on hand, you know, for traveling or just something like for every day if you don't want to, you know, really think about what to put on. This has some really great options. Now, if you are very light and fair skin, these shades are going to be more of a medium depth. You know, even the lightest shade here is definitely going to be deeper than like my lid color, but I think they offer a really beautiful base. And actually that lightest matte shade, I think is great as a one and done all over lid color with just a little bit of an eyeliner or smudging that deep espresso brown in as well. So overall, you know, I think this is just a really nice, easy palette to have. It does retail for $27 US. And along with that, we do have the My Mini Dream Glow Blush. And this is the first time I have seen this style of blush from Natasha Denona. You know, I have to say, packaging wise, I'm not a huge fan of like the paint splatters and so forth on the packaging. It doesn't bother me one way or the other, but it does seem to appeal more to a younger demographic. We have a 2-year shelf life with the blush as well. It's a 4 grams of product and it is made in Italy. It's not tested on animals. It's vegan, mineral oil free, you know, UV filters free, D5 free, paraben free, alcohol free, and so forth. So the eyeshadow palette is free of the same things. So just some things to know, you know, I had a lot of requests for people looking for vegan makeup recommendations. This is definitely a brand to consider because it is something that they keep at the forefront and you know, it's definitely an attribute of the brand. I often get asked for vegan makeup recommendations. I would say that Natasha Denona is definitely a brand to keep in the forefront of your mind if you are looking for vegan makeup. Whether you're looking for something vegan or not, though, I do think that these are some really nice products. The blush palette, I want to talk a little bit more about this. This is described as a gel to powder highlighter. You can, you know, texturally, it feels kind of not quite as creamy as her regular metallics that are, you know, really kind of soft and buttery. This feels a little bit firmer than that, definitely very finely milled, but it does have a similar texture to that. Now, the mattes are described as, depending on where you look, some describe it just as a cream blush, but it's really a creamy powder blush. It's going to be reminiscent of her creamy matte eyeshadows in texture. So it goes on very nicely, and you can put this on with a soft brush and get, you know, a softer application, but it really just kind of melts into the skin really well with a buffing brush. So for today, I used the Chikuhodo T3 brush, which is a smaller buffing brush. And I think that it gives just a beautiful application. You don't even need highlighter with it because once you buff it in, you get a little bit of natural radiance from there, even though those are matte products. So I think that the formulas on these are really great. It is definitely going to be a peachy rose shade though. So, you know, I personally was hoping to see this to be a little bit more pink than it is, especially based upon the written descriptions. So the blush retails for $20 US. Overall, I'd have to say that both products though are winners and I'm really happy with both of them, but let's move on to some comparisons with the eyeshadows. So this is the I Need a Nude along with the new Mini My Dream. And then I also wanted to take a look at the Glam palette. And you can see that we have some similar tones in both of these palettes. So let's take a look at a few. So I'm going to swatch the I Need a Nude kind of right here. So we have it really close to this palette. And we're going to start off in the top row here. We're not going to swatch like the rosy shades, but let's start off with the shade Stone here. You can see that this has a little bit more pink in there. It's a little bit more of a rosy taupe. The shade Whisper here, this is going to be a little bit, it's slightly cooler in tone, but you can see that that is going to be very similar to this middle shade here. Then we have Ella, which is a deeper brown metallic. And you can see that it's going to be cooler in tone than the first shade in the new Mini My Dream. Travertine, this last shade here in this row, let's take a look at that. And this is actually going to be a little bit more golden, whereas the one in the Mini My Dream actually is a little bit more coppery. We have the shade Delilah here. This is one of my favorites from this palette, but you can see there that, again, this is going to be a little bit cooler than what we have going on in the Mini My Dream. We'll take a look at Filigree, but I don't think this one really, yeah, it doesn't really go with anything there. And then I skipped over Silhouette. Let's go to Silhouette and see how this compares to our deeper Cocoa matte here. And you can see that the Cocoa mattes, they are very, very similar, but we have a little bit more purple in the I Need a Nude, whereas this is going to be more of a true cool brown. So that's going to be our difference here. You can see there's a little bit more of like an eggplant shade in the I Need a Nude. Then let's take a look at Tender here. And you can see, again, it's going to be a cooler matte brown. And then last up, we have Mesh. And let's see how that one goes. Mesh, again, it's a little bit more pink, whereas this is more peach. But it's going to be closest to the second shade in the Mini My Dream. But you can see it's definitely going to be cooler and rosier. So that's how those stack up. The shades are not dupes, but you can still get similar looks. And I would say that the I Need a Nude, actually, it runs a little bit cooler overall. Now we're going to take a look at the Glam palette. Let's start off with this shade here, Inner Corner. And we're going to put this one vertically here just so we can kind of see. You can see it's going to be a little bit deeper and peachier than the middle shade, but those are similar. Then we have this crease shade, which is one of my favorites in the palette, but you can see it's going to be significantly cooler. And then moving on, we have this shade here, Smoke, which is a really nice matte, but again, it's going to be a little bit cooler. It's actually kind of a cross between the two bottom shades. And then the shade Blend here, see how that one goes. You can see Blend is going to be a little bit, it's got some warm orangey tones, but it's like a deeper version of the second shade here. And Lash Line, so this is our deep cocoa brown here. And let's just put it, let's see here. You know, I'm just going to move up here. So you can see that this has more like gray black tones in it. So this is definitely more of a, it's brown, but it has more soft black in it. And then last up, we're just going to swatch these two. So we've got Center Eyelid here, which you can see it definitely looks more gold than it does in the pan. And then Brow Bone here. And yeah, so overall, the warmer tones in this palette lean more yellow versus peach. But yeah, you know, again, different shades, no dupes, but you can still get similar vibes from these palettes. So whether or not you want all of them, you know, or if you've been waiting for the perfect mini, I think this is a really great mini. Let's take a look at a couple of minis. I don't have too many of her minis, but I wanted to take a look at the mini gold. And I wanted to take a look at this shade here in particular and see how this compares. But it looks like this is going to definitely be more yellow. We'll put that right there. Yeah, it's more of that like khaki shade. So that one definitely doesn't go. And then I also wanted to take a look at kind of this peachy matte here in the mini retro, and this is probably still my favorite mini from Natasha Denona. I have to say I love her fun minis like the mini pastel. You can see that this shade though is more of like a rusty rose clay shade. So yep. So we're not going to do a lot of blush comparisons, but I have this sitting here. So let's take a look at the Chanel Rose Polaire. This is one of the new blushes from the Chanel Beige collection, and it's a very warm pink. So I wanted to show you how that compares. You can see we definitely have, this is more like salmon pink versus peachy rose. You can see we've got more of those rosy, dusty tones in the Natasha Denona versus the Rose Polaire. And then I want to take a look at this Surratt shade. This is the shade Parfait. And it's just a really nice kind of peachy coral. But I want to show you, this is going to be a little bit brighter. But we do have kind of similar hues in there. It's just that this is like a brighter, more of a translucent base versus like a dustier base. And this is Peau de Pêche from Surratt. So let's see how this one goes. Oh, definitely much more of an orange. This is Tom Ford Peach Poison. Let's take a look at the oranger side here. This is definitely going to be more orange. Yep, that's way too orange. And one more. This here is Sun Drunk from Tom Ford. So let's take a look at these two shades here. We'll put them right down here. And yeah, you can get a very similar color palette from Tom Ford's Sun Drunk. You know, again, not exactly the same, but definitely very similar vibes. So I would say that those two are close enough. So I hope that was helpful. Overall, I think both of the new Natasha Denona products are really nice. You know, they're great everyday basics, great products to have on hand when you don't want to really think about what to do or you're looking for neutrals, great travel products, but they definitely lean warmer than, you know, I originally thought they would. So yeah, again, the eyeshadows, neutral, leaning warm, the blush, definitely warm. So thank you so much. Let's go ahead though and move on to the Chikuhodo brushes. So they have two different holiday collections. This one here is the Belle Blanc, and there are 3 brushes in this collection. Now, the reason I want to show you these handles up close is because this handle technique is different to me. So you can see this is in the Belle Fleur collection. This is actually like a purple handle here, which I thought it was black originally when I originally ordered it. I pre-ordered it when it first became available. And look at the printing. So we have kind of we've got the same pictures on both. Let's see here, make that a little bit clearer. But it's a printing design that is Maki inspired. So it's actually printed on, is not a hand-drawn Maki work. So let's take a look at the 2 different sets and then the demos, and we'll talk a little bit about these. So this is our first set, the Belle Blanc. So this is a 3-piece set. It retails for approximately $100. Your prices will change as the exchange rate from Japan changes and depending what retailer you use. So Beautylish has had the best pricing that I've seen on these, and they are right around $100 for this set. So we start off, you can see we got these pearly white handles. You've got this beautiful, you know, printed design is inspired by bouquets. You're supposed to think kind of flowers on a snowy background. So this is our first brush in here. And I have to say, I love this brush. This is one I've been using a lot. So this is our powder cheek brush. You can see it's angled. It's very soft. This is Chikuhodo Goat. So it's a nice high quality goat hair brush. The brush length itself is 155 millimeters and the bristle length is 40 millimeters. So this is it here. And then along with this, we have 2 different eyeshadow brushes. So these are both going to be Chikuhodo Goat. So slightly lower quality than the larger brush, but is not really noticeable in use. So we have this eyeshadow brush here. This is going to be kind of a round flat shape. This is one that you could use for like buffing into the crease. You could use for lay down. You know, if it's super, you know, if it's a super sparkly shade, you're going to end up with fallout with something like this. It's a little bit too fluffy for that, but it works great for an all-in-one shade, working in the crease, so forth. So this is going to be the first eyeshadow brush in the set. And then we also have a tapered eyeshadow brush. So more like a larger pencil brush here. Again, this is Chikuhodo, and you can see that you've got, I mean, look at the flick here. It's going to have some firmness because of the shape, but you can see it's also pretty soft. This works really well in the inner corner or lining, smudging around the eyes, and that's the ideal use for that one. Let's take a look at the other set, and then we'll look at all of the demos together. So the next set, again, this is the Belle Fleur set. We've got a really beautiful kind of like a deep smoky purple handle here. Again, we've got kind of that pearlescent finish in there, and we have the same printing here. I have to say, I really love the shade of green that they used on there. Green and purple are my favorite colors, so I think these go very nicely together. So first up, we have more of your traditional round flat powder brush. So it's almost round, but it is actually an oval ferrule here. So it's a round flat brush, and this is going to be Chikuhodo. You can see this one is going to be dyed. And this is just a really nice, you know, fluffy powder brush. It performs well. It has, you know, it's not so airy that you're always getting a super light dusting. You can actually get a little bit more product with this. I would say it's medium bodied. So it's a really nice powder brush. You can see how it flicks. And then next up, we have a cheek brush. And this is going to have a round ferrule. So this is your round cheek brush. This is my favorite style of blush brush. I love round ferrule brushes. But, you know, it's great for kind of a soft buffing motion. It's dense enough that it's going to apply product really well. And this one here is going to be dyed Chikuhodo as well. Next, we move on to the largest eyeshadow brush. And this one is actually going to be Gray Squirrel. It is very, very soft. You can definitely feel the difference with this. So this is going to be a round flat brush. It's basically a large shader. It's great for one and done shades or adding like a base color. So this is going to be Gray Squirrel. And because it is soft, you're going to get a nice soft kind of airbrush finish with this. Moving on, we also have kind of this smaller brush here. This is a shadow liner brush, and this is actually Pony. You can see it's pretty stiff. So this is great for a liner. You could, if you wanted to, you could even use this in the brows, but they do have a brow brush in this collection. But you can see it's pretty stiff, so you can get a pretty nice line. It's still, you can see it's tapered, so we've got more hairs down here at the base, and it kind of pinches together as we get further out. So you can get a very thin line, but if you're going to press harder, you're going to get a slightly thicker line. So it's pretty versatile. It works well with, you know, eyeshadow to smudge in. You could definitely use this on top of, or, you know, to smudge out eyeliner that you've used as well. It's a pretty robust brush. And then we have our eyebrow brush. And this is actually Badger. And I think this might be the first Badger brush I have. I probably have another eyebrow brush like this, but yeah, you know, this is going to be a stiff hair. You can see it springs back very quickly. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility in this. This is going to be stiff. It's really great for adding things in here. But if you are looking for a thicker smudged line around the eyes, this is very good for that. So you could use both of these brushes for lining the eyes, but this will definitely give you a thicker one. You can see how thick that is there. And yeah, this is just going to be a nice angled brow brush. So let's go ahead and take a look at the demos, and we'll talk a little bit more about these brushes. Now, as I mentioned, the white set, which is our Belle Blanc set, we've got 3 brushes. It retails for approximately $100 US. And our powder cheek brush, it's Chikuhodo, whereas the two eyeshadow brushes are going to be Chikuhodo Goat. Our powder cheek brush, we've got a brush length of 155 millimeters, while the bristle length is 40 millimeters. It's angled. It's still pretty, it's a pretty large angled brush, which I really like. You could definitely use this for face powder. You could use it for contour, bronzer, blush. It's a very versatile brush. Out of all of the brushes in both of these collections, this powder cheek brush, this angled brush, this one is my favorite out of all of them. So I think that's the brush that really makes this set worth purchasing. And, as a set that's approximately $100 with this nice powder brush, is it worth it? I think that's going to be a personal decision, of course, but I think this is a really nice brush to complement a collection where you primarily have basics. You've got the more traditional shapes, or you're just starting off. So people who have a lot of brushes, these shapes are going to be repeats, and so forth. But I think this makes a really nice gift. It also is just, it's just a nice set of brushes that are traditional, yet with a little twist in this powder brush. Because this angle brush, the size of it, I think, is what makes it more versatile here. Most of my angle brushes are going to be a little bit, they're either really large or they're much smaller. This is kind of a really nice medium large size here. So I think it makes it very versatile. So I'll have the dimensions for the brushes on the screen as we're looking at these demos, so you can take a look at those there. But moving on to the Belle Fleur collection, we have this powder brush. This is going to be more of your traditional powder brush. It's going to be dyed goat hair, which you do want to use primarily with powder products. The dyed goat hairs they're slightly more delicate than the undyed goat hair that we have in the Belle Fleur, the Belle Blanc collection. The Belle Blanc is undyed. You can use that with liquids, creams, powders, very versatile. Whereas our dyed goat hair, it's not going to really kill it if you use it with a cream or a liquid product once in a while or anything like that. But anytime you dye your hair, think about your own hair. If you dye it, you are essentially weakening that hair a little bit. And so that's what's happening during this process as well. So to some, it can feel a little bit softer, but for the most part, you do want to stay with powder products with the dyed goat hair because the hairs themselves are a little bit more delicate. So this powder brush, it's round flat, but it's going to be kind of your traditional powder brush. It's a nice large size. It's great for loose powder. You could definitely use it with pressed powder as well. Because it is so large, I would definitely use it exclusively though for face powder. It's a little bit too large for blush. People who love large bronzer brushes, this could work. So overall, I think this is nice. Again, that's Chikuhodo Goat. Our cheek brush is also Chikuhodo Goat, and I really love this style, the round blush brush, because I love being able to buff in my products and get kind of more of a little bit of a natural sheen by buffing the product in. And this is dense enough that you can really do that, but it's still going to give you a soft finish. So this, out of this set, this is probably going to be my most used brush from this set. But I really have to say I love the softness of the largest eyeshadow brush, which is the Gray Squirrel. So for a favorite, it's hard to pick between the two. I do have other round cheek brushes, so I'd probably go with the Gray Squirrel brush. So again, that's round flat and it's a pretty large size. So it's going to be great for one and done or setting a base color on the lid. And that Gray Squirrel just feels very heavenly on the lids. So when I do a lot of eyeshadow swatches and my lids get a little bit sore, I tend to reach for these softer hairs like this, at least to put a dusting of powder or something on the lid. Now the liner and the brow brush, these are nice. They're not must-haves. Honestly, I very rarely use eyebrow brushes. I tend to prefer the spoolies and so forth that come with brow products. So I probably won't use the Water Badger brush too often, but it is a nice brush. It does splay out a little bit. So if you are using it for eyeshadow, I do find these hairs are a little bit more wiry. So it's a little bit more challenging to keep them exactly in a pristine position. Mine do tend to flare out a little bit even after washing and compressing them in a sleeve. So, you know, that's my least favorite brush. Now the shadow liner brush, that one, as I mentioned, is pony hair. It's a nice brush. I think this is very functional. I do have other brushes similar to this in my collection, so it's not that it's anything unique. It actually reminds me a lot of the Sonia G Flat Definer. So let's go ahead and move into some comparisons. And one other thing I want to mention is the black set does come with a brush case. So you've got this flap here to keep your brushes clean. This side has it actually pressed down. You've got space for that, and you've got a little pouch here. So the Belle Fleur collection comes with a case. And that one retails for, you know, about $180 to $200, depending on where you purchase and what the exchange rate is at the time. So we're gonna start off with some comparisons of this angled cheek brush from the Belle Blanc. And I wanna show you how like wide and fluffy this is too. So you can see this is that here, and I wanted to compare it to a few brushes that I have in my collection. This one here is the Face Pro from Sonia G. So you can see it's a pretty large angled brush as well, but you can see that the curvature is different. Whereas this it's still mostly flat, and then we have kind of like this little curve here, and then it kind of goes flat. Whereas this is gonna be more gradual, and it's more tapered on the sides going this way as well. Whereas this is pretty much straight going flat up. So we have more of a flat top, whereas this is going to be a bit more angled. So you can see there is a difference between these. This is actually the Belle Blanc is slightly airier, whereas this is going to be a little bit more dense. And you can see, well, you can see that this one actually splays out a little bit more than the Face Pro. Another larger angled brush I have, this is from this is a Chikuhodo Cherry Blossom set. They've had this out the last couple of years, so I don't know if it'll come back this year, but I bought mine a couple of years ago, and you can see it's also an angled brush, very soft. It's also Chikuhodo Goat, but you can see that we definitely have a different shape. This is going to be more pressed on the sides, so you can see we've got the pinch ferrule, whereas this is going to be more of an oval ferrule. And you can see that our head shapes are just going to be pretty different. So this one is great for more of like your back in, you know, one direction kind of motion, or spreading like this. Whereas this one here from the Chikuhodo is fluffy enough that you could even use it more like a round brush. So just a couple differences there. And just a quick size comparison for those of you who have the Rephr 04 brush. This is Rephr's angled cheek brush. And you can see how much smaller this is. So, you know, similar shape. We've got a similar cut of the, well, not cut since they're not cut, they're hand placed, but a similar shape of the hairs here. But you can see that the Chikuhodo is significantly larger. Now for the larger eyeshadow brush, I want to take a look at these two. We've got the Rephr 01 Max, which we'll put on the one side, and then the Sonia G Worker Pro. So you can see our handle is going to be the shortest with the Chikuhodo. Okay, but brush head wise, it's kind of a combination of these two brushes. So this is the Rephr 01 Max. You can see that they're pretty similar, but the 01 Max is a little bit larger. It's a little bit wider here, but we have a similar curvature. This is a little bit more rounded, whereas we've got a little bit more of a taper in the Chikuhodo. So Worker Pro, we have a very similar shape at the top portion, but it's smaller significantly overall. And yeah, the Chikuhodo is almost like a slightly fluffier Worker Pro, but also longer. So it's kind of like the perfect cross between the Rephr 01 Max and the Sonia G Worker Pro. So that would be this one here. Let me just show you how that one goes. And you can see how much flexibility you have with this. And for the smaller brush, I just really wanted to compare this with the Rephr 26. I feel like these are kind of the closest. The Rephr 26 is going to be a little bit larger. They both have the round diameter, but the Rephr is larger overall, and we have a stronger taper with the Chikuhodo. So you can see, because it is going to be a stronger, skinnier taper at the top, it's a little bit finer point, whereas the Rephr is going to give you a thicker smudge. So this is our Belle Blanc set. Moving on to the Belle Fleur set. Again, as I mentioned, this first brush here, the powder brush, it's more like a traditional powder brush. It does have a slightly more rounded, it has slightly more rounded edges overall. And this is technically a round flat shape. This is an oval ferrule. So I want to compare it to a few. This one here is the Chikuhodo KZ01. It is discontinued. You can see shape-wise, it does look very similar. This, however, is Kazan squirrel hair, so it's going to be significantly softer. And you can see that it's also going to be wider. So this is going to be a larger powder brush in general. You can see it's a little bit airier. We've got a stronger kickback of the fibers with the goat in the Chikuhodo. But size-wise, these are pretty similar. Another one I wanted to take a look at because I figure a lot of people probably have one of the Chikuhodo Beautylish, or not Chikuhodo. It was Chikuhodo at one point, but the Beautylish Lunar New Year brushes. This one here is the Year of the Rabbit, but they're all pretty much the same shape. You've just got differences from batches and so forth. But just to show you our similarities here, you can see that this is going to be a bit more square. This is also going to be a round flat, but it is significantly thicker than the Chikuhodo. And you can see that here our hairs kind of go straight up. We start tapering right here at the top. So it definitely has a blockier appearance, whereas this is kind of a bit more rounded. It's more of like if you look at the drawings of makeup brushes that we've seen from like the 50s and 60s, you always see that perfect round brush, like the La Mer powder brush kind of has that shape. I don't have that brush, or I would show you how they compare. But, you know, I think that that's a good shape comparison there. Next, we have the round cheek brush, and I want to compare this with a few. This is the Sonyeji Fundamental cheek brush that just came out, the soft buffer. So this is also round ferrule, and you can see that the brush head sizes are pretty similar. The Sonyeji, you know, our shape is very similar between the two. This is going to be undyed goat hair. And I would say that the Chikuhodo is slightly more rounded on the edges going here, make a little bit more of a ball shape, whereas this is a little bit flatter since it is technically a buffer. But they definitely have some similarities there. I also want to take a look at one of my all-time favorite cheek brushes from Sonyeji, and this is the Sky Series Classic Cheek. Now you can see that this is going to be even more rounded than the Chikuhodo. The Chikuhodo is a little bit flatter on top. The Chikuhodo is actually kind of the perfect marriage between the soft buffer and the classic cheek. But you can see size-wise, they are similar. We do have a flatter, more pinched ferrule here in the Sky series. So, you know, this is truly round. Another one that I want to take a look at, this is the Chikuhodo. This is from the Winter Lights collection. Was this last year or the year before? You can see handle-wise, the Chikuhodo is a little bit taller, but we do have a very similar shape. This is a little bit more square, but they're both going to be round brushes here. Great at buffing and applying powder. This does feel a little bit more airy than the Chikuhodo, which is a slightly more dense. And last up, the Rephr 37, one of my favorite round cheek brushes. We do have a round ferrule. You can see that this is going to splay out a bit more, and you can see here, you know, that we really get more edge work on this, whereas it's going to stay a bit more compact. The bristles will stay a little bit more tightly packed when you are swirling this compared to the Rephr. You can see also that the head size, you know, the Rephr, I would say the Rephr is ever so slightly larger in diameter, but the Chikuhodo here is going to be slightly longer with bristle hairs. Now, our gray squirrel eyeshadow brush, great for a one and done. Really just wanted to compare it to a couple. This is the Chikuhodo F05. You can see that the F05 is a little bit larger. This is going to be fox hair, but you know, it is going to be a similar shape. It's just the F05 is going to be a little bit larger here. So it's a little bit wider overall. And then another one, this is from the Zen series from Chikuhodo. And you can see that very similar shape. The Zen brush is going to be a little bit longer in hairs. So again, we're looking at kind of a mix of the two brushes to get this Chikuhodo holiday brush. And this is going to be our last comparison. We have the flat definer from Sonia G. You can see it's significantly longer. And you can see that it's going to have a different shape. This is going to have longer hairs. It's more dramatically oval, whereas this is going to have more of a flat top. The flat definer is definitely going to be more flexible. We have stiffer fibers with the Chikuhodo. The Water Badger, you know, it's a standard eyebrow brush. So I hope this was helpful, and let me know what you think of the sets and the Natasha Denona stuff. You know, overall, I think the Natasha Denona stuff, great neutrals, great for every day or for traveling. They definitely lean warm. The Chikuhodo sets, I think they are both nice sets, but they aren't like wow must-have sets. I think they are great for beginners, or maybe to add, you know, a couple brushes to a collection if you are still kind of starting out. But if you've got a large collection already, these are probably duplicates of things that you already have. And the hair fibers, you know, are pretty standard goat for the most part. So nice, but not really wow. The handles I think are really gorgeous, but you know, you can kind of tell that it's a printed technique. So, you know, I'm just not as in love with them as I was hoping to be. I'm still very happy with them, happy that I picked them up. But, you know, if you are looking for a really luxe brush set, these are not that, in my opinion. These are a little bit more basic. So really beautiful though. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you very soon. Have a great day.